All right, streaming is going, receiving content. Let's make sure that we are good to go. All right, great. Okay. You're good, and everyone saw me fix my hair for a second. Sorry, fixing some settings real quick. Okay, let me know if we need any volume adjusted or anything like that. I think we should be good to go. All right, we'll give it just a second. Okay, cool. All right, so for those of you that missed the last class, my name is Ben Nelson. I am one of the instructors for LambdaSchool. I'm a full-stack software engineer for iFit. What that means is I work on our client, I work on the website that actually goes down to the browser of our users, and then I also work on the server, I work on the API. So we use MongoDB and Node, Express. It's a JavaScript stack front to back, and so it's a cool thing with JavaScript that nowadays it's becoming so common and so popular that there are all of these tools that are being developed to allow you to use JavaScript in multiple different environments and different use cases. So, like for example, JavaScript just started out as a client-side scripting language. It was only used inside the browser to work with HTML and add some functionality and different things to the browser. But it has since become very fleshed out, and they have these complex and powerful front-end frameworks that allow you to make these really powerful front-end applications. But then they also have Node that has come out that made it so you could write JavaScript as a server-side language. And so you can set up servers that listen on ports and can do read and write actions to files and streaming operations and different I/O operations, things like that make it so you can have JavaScript now as a very powerful server-side language, and it's actually quite powerful and can handle a lot of different concurrent transactions and things like that, much better than a lot of other server languages actually. So there are a lot of advantages to it beyond just the fact of you're just using JavaScript on the server. And then also you can write JavaScript now in mobile for mobile applications using React Native. So you can create iOS apps for iPhones. You can create Android apps, and you can get a lot of code reuse between the two. So in our upcoming part-time and full-time immersive premium courses, we're actually going to be teaching JavaScript, and JavaScript's going to be just kind of the heart and the core of our curriculum. We're going to teach you a little bit of mobile development at the end. We're going to teach you how to do even some machine learning with it, in addition to all of the server stuff and all of the client and browser stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things you'll be able to build coming out of this class, even going down to working on hardware and automating drones and things like that using Tessel and desktop applications. Anyway, there's a lot of cool applications for you to be able to apply this programming language. So today we're gonna jump in and we're gonna add some JavaScript. We're gonna add a script. They call it we're gonna add this JavaScript script to our client, and it's going to add some different behavior to our HTML, to the front end that we're going to be working with. So I'm going to jump in and do a screen share, and we'll get in there and play around with it. So, all right, let's see. Let me come over here and display capture. Great, okay. All right, so here's what I have built. It's a simple little, it's very similar to the stuff that you guys have been building in the homework, but it's a database for your books, your favorite books. And so you can type in your name, author, year published, pages, and hit submit. And so I was playing around with it a few minutes ago, so there's already some stuff in there. But let's add in, let's see, Harry Potter. So you can see J.R. Tolkien. I was put on Lord of the Rings. J.K. Rowling, I think that's how you spell it. You're published around 2000, I think. So pages, I don't know, 300 or so. We'll submit it. Okay, successfully inserted. Jump back. And then if we come in here to My Books, we see that it's, I actually did clear it out. So here we see the book represented inside of our database. Okay, so when you work on your homework for tonight, you're going to have this pre-built API. It's not going to be books, it's going to be pets. And but what you're going to do is you're going to fork that from GitHub, and then you're going to clone it down to your machine, and then you're going to work on your solution, and then commit and push up to your own forked version of this repository. So let's go in and look at some of the code. So here we have, here's what the database looks like. We have a name, so a books table, and then we have a name column, an author column, a year published column, and a pages column. And pages and year published are both integer. So a note about SQLite 3. When you specify that you want a column to be an integer, it's not very strict, and so if you put a string in it, that's fine. If you put in a string, it will try to turn it into a number. So if it's like the number 500 with quotes around it, it will turn it into a number if it can. If it doesn't, it just sticks it in there and nothing breaks. Anyway, that's kind of how JavaScript is. JavaScript is a little more of a like loosey-goosey language. It's the data typing isn't very strict, not strict at all, and there's some things that can make it convenient, a little easier to learn, and can give you a lot of flexibility if you're careful. All right, so here's our server. So we have a couple routes, just rendering the home template. Just this method that's almost exactly the same as what you've seen before. And then we have this route right here to return a JSON version of the data that comes back. The reason that we pass the data, the table to JSONify, and the reason we do that is because we need to return a string. And so we can take this Python data structure and turn it into a string and then pass it back to the client. If you tried to pass in a list or something like that, then you would see some errors. Okay, so then here we're jumping into our home.html. So we're just working with this one template. We just have one template in our application, and yeah, and that's all we're working with here. So we're going to keep it pretty simple for this lecture. So we have our header, bringing in a style sheet. I'm going to jump back over to the browser. As you can see, the background is not white. It's white smoke, kind of that cliched off-white that's used on a bunch of different websites and is a little overused now. But all right, so we have that brought in. The link, we link those in the header. Style sheets are brought in the head of the application. Then we have our body, and then inside of the body we have a single header, My Books, and then here we have a form. And we have it's for the new book form. And so something to point out here is we have actually I'm gonna get rid of these IDs. We're gonna write them in later. Okay, so something that we're going to do now is we're going to learn how to include a JavaScript file into our Flask template and how we can get them connected. So to include a JavaScript file, you put a script tag, and you put the script tag, you put it at the bottom of the body, and then it has a source attribute on it that is a path, and so you can go static scripts, and I called it home.js, I think. Yep, home.js. Okay, and then script. So unlike a link tag can be, it's self-closing, and then you use href. Script tag, you have to have a closing script tag, and then you put a source attribute and then that's where you pass in the relative path to your JavaScript file. Okay, so here we have our home.js file. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to go console.log hello world. Okay, so console.log, that is the JavaScript version of print. And it's just going to take this string that we're writing in line, hello world, and it's going to print it out to the console. And the console that you're going to see is going to be at the bottom of the browser in the debugging console. Okay, so if I jump over to Chrome, I'm going to open up the developer console, Command Option J, or I don't know, you can pull it up through one of the menus if you search for it. But anyway, I would recommend that you use Chrome. That seems to be the most widely used browser right now for development. They have some of the most powerful tools. The other one that you see people use a lot is Mozilla Firefox, but I've yet to meet someone who uses Safari or Internet Explorer for web development. Internet Explorer is kind of the black sheep of the bunch. Instead of having a single browser that they update and increase in versions like Chrome, you have IE6 and IE7 and IE8, and you have these like set versions of a browser that you have to download, and if you want the new one, you go and you download the new one. And so it makes it so there's a lot of people out there with really old browsers that can't run a lot of the new convenient development features. And so something you have to pay attention to when you're developing your application is do I need 100% of people everywhere to be able to use this website, or am I okay to weed out 5% of the people by not including Internet Explorer 6, or am I okay to cut out some of those other ones? And so it's kind of funny that I had a teacher once before who called it Internet Exploder because he developed these like websites, go in and show people, and they pull it up on their computer in an old version of Internet Explorer, and the styles and everything would be interpreted differently, and that page would just be all exploded everywhere and look kind of gross. So anyway, that's something kind of interesting about browsers. They all interpret and do stuff a little bit differently, and keeping track of those differences and making sure that your application looks good on multiple browsers is kind of a pain in the neck. But anyway, that's something to learn about later. Okay, so now let's refresh the page, and boom, we see hello world appear at the bottom. And then it also tells you what file it came from and what line. So it came from line 1 of home.js. Okay, something important that I want to bring up is if you go to the network tab, there's this disable cache option. You want to select that while we're developing in this. Otherwise, the browser will cache your JavaScript and CSS files. And so when you do a refresh, those files won't update locally. And so you have to do Command-Shift-R or Control-Shift-R and do a hard refresh because your browser, in order to be fast and it'll try to cut some corners, and it won't try to download every single file for a website because a lot of the time those files will be the same, and so it doesn't need to go out and grab them all fresh every time you refresh the page. Like for Facebook, for example, a significant number of the files are probably going to be exactly the same, from 1 minute to the next, and so it doesn't need to grab every single file and bring it down from Facebook servers. But here we're disabling the cache. We want our browser to grab everything from the server while we're doing this. That way we don't have to do Command-Shift-R and do the shift key every single time we do a hard refresh every single time we refresh the page. So this makes it a little more convenient. And it can be a frustrating bug when it's like, I swear I changed that code, why isn't it working? And it's like, well, it would work, but your browser's cached the old version of the file, and the new version in your IDE hasn't been downloaded by the browser yet. So something to keep in mind. Okay, so if we jump over into this Elements tab, and let me zoom in a little bit, you see these little triangles, and you can kind of click and expand these different elements on the page. We call this the DOM, the DOM, or the Document Object Model. What the Document Object Model is it takes your HTML, which is just text, and then it converts it into these nodes in your browser that your JavaScript code can communicate with. And so one of the main purposes behind JavaScript is to interact with your HTML or your DOM nodes, and then it can change different attributes. It can change colors. It can hide things. It can make things appear. It can, it handles requests to browsers. And so far we've been able to do that just with forms, but later on when you want to do more complex interactions with browsers, you do that all through JavaScript. So much so that in my career I've actually never had to really build out a specific form object to use submit tools and things like that. With HTML, usually all of that is handled within some type of JavaScript framework or library, either within React or Angular or Ember, one of the many others, or with jQuery. jQuery is what we'll be going over in the next couple classes. So okay, so we have these different nodes here. So the difference between a DOM node and then just the HTML is HTML. That's just your text just your text in the file. The DOM is when it takes that text, takes the styles, takes the JavaScript, kind of mixes it all together, and it creates these interactive nodes that you can come in and change and manipulate live and in real time. So now we're going to show you how to do some of that. So what we're going to do is, in our application, we have this form that we can pass in some data, and what we're going to do is we're going to add in some different validation forms. And I actually left some of this coded, but we're going to be putting in some JavaScript logic to check the inputs that we're passing in, so we can alert the user and let them know, like, hey, you're sending the information that you're typing into this box is not what you want to be typing in there. This isn't secure. This isn't for security's purpose. This is just to make it more convenient for the user and just to create a better user experience. All the code that goes to the browser, the user can interact with it, they can change it, and then they can send the messages back to your server. So any type of security has to happen between like on your server. Your server is where you have the walls around it. That's where you build your fortress, and you have your very specific little pathways that you let people in by and let information out by. That's where you're doing a lot of your security. Here in the client, you can do different things to kind of scramble the code and stuff like that, but really anything you put in the client code, anything that's in your HTML is not secure. So you don't want any type of compromising information or anything like that here in your client. So, all right. So let's go to So let's start adding some validation. So we have this onSubmit property right here that we can add to this form tag. And so what onSubmit does is it's saying onSubmit. So when the user hits return or pushes the button to submit the form, when that event happens, then we're going to run this function. We're going to call validate form, and then we're going to return it. And if we return false here, it will stop the form from submitting. If we return true, then the form submits as normal and sends the information onto the server. So all right, let's make our function. So we call it validate form. So function validate form. Okay. So we're using the function keyword here. This is a function declaration. In our main course, we're going to go into, we're going to do another JavaScript course starting in March, and in that course, we're going to go into more of the details and the nitty-gritty of how to write more sophisticated JavaScript, and how you can in the differences and the nuances between different aspects of the language, like a function declaration or a function expression. But anyway, for right now, we have this JavaScript function, and it's this name right here links it to this, and it's going to run in, and it's going to grab this function, and it's going to execute all of the code that's in between these two curly brackets. So that code's going to run whenever the form is submitted. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go return false. That will stop the form from submitting to the server. And so what that means is we won't see a page. The page won't change. Nothing's going to happen. It's just going to just going to stop. It's just going to kill the process. So all right, and then we're going to put out a message. So we're going to say validating form. Okay, so now we're yeah, validating the form. Okay, so now let's jump back in the browser, and we'll refresh it, and then we'll hit submit. Okay, so nothing happened. Jump over into the console. We see validating form printing out, and so as you see, nothing happened. If it said return true, it would insert a blank item into the database. So just to show that difference, I go return true. I jump back over to Chrome. Now I submit. I got to refresh, submit, and then it successfully inserted an empty book. And I go back, hit my books, and then you can see all these empty quote mark, like these empty strings. Okay. So if I come back over in here now to the editor, we see that, yeah, so validate form links to here. Validate form, when it runs, is going to return true. So this right here, this expression, the name of the function followed by the open and closing parentheses, that forms an expression. And that essentially in runtime is going to simplify down to the value true. And then that will be returned here within this onSubmit. And then the browser knows that when it sees that passed into onSubmit, then it's going to successfully pass it along. If it returns false, it's going to kill it. So, all right, let's go to, okay, so go back to validate form. All right, so now if we want to validate these different inputs, we need to have a way to be able to get their values and get the value. And there's a couple different ways, and I'm going to show you probably the most straightforward way for right now. Is we're going to put IDs. We're going to add, if you remember from CSS, you can add IDs and classes to these HTML elements, and you can reference them in your CSS code. So we can also reference those in our JavaScript code to be able to target different elements on the page. So we have name, author, year published, pages, and then we have this submit one. So we want to target name, author, year published, and pages. And we want to be able to get the values from them. So I'm going to add an ID, and I'm just going to call this name input. And that's the pattern I'm going to follow with all these. I'm just going to make them in camel case, and then I'm going to put the name of the value in before here. So instead of name, I'll go author. Instead of name, I'll go here, year published, and then pages. Okay. All right. Okay, so now we jump back over here into Home.js. So now what we can do is we need to get a reference to these values in the DOM. And so what we're going to do is we're going to so we'll do like from the name input. So we'll go var name gets document. And so document is a JavaScript object that is on the global scope, and it's created when your script is attached and running in the browser. And so the document object gives you a whole bunch of different references to the DOM, to these HTML nodes that you need to access and manipulate. So we're going to go document.get element by ID, and then that takes a string in, and so the string is the name of the ID. So I'm going to jump back to the HTML. So you have name input, and so we're going to go name input. I'm going to go dot value. And the value, that's a specific property for input fields that grabs whatever is in the input box. So right here we're saying on the document object, use the get element by ID method. We pass in the string name input. This expression right here simplifies down to the actual DOM node. And then on that DOM node we access the dot value parameter, or the property. And then that value is returned and assigned to the variable name. So that's kind of the basic flow right there that's going on. We have this big long expression that gets simplified down to a single value, and so name is equal to essentially the string that's in that input box. So we're going to repeat that for the other different. We're going to repeat that for the other input values. So go over here. We're going to go author input. Okay, and we're going to grab your published input. and then we're going to grab pages. Whenever you're matching on strings, it can be a good idea to copy and paste, because if you're like one character off or if you have kind of a typo, it can be a little tricky to figure out. And so copying and pasting or autocomplete, like if you have the option autocomplete set up in your IDE, or like whatever you're developing with, and you can use tab to autocomplete, always do that, because then it ensures that there's no typos when you're typing the different variable names. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna just make this, well, okay. All right, so we have these different values here, and then I'm gonna return false just so the page doesn't change, and then I'm gonna console log these out. So I'm gonna go name, author, year published, pages. Okay, so what's gonna happen then is when I go to submit the form, we're gonna grab the values from these 4 input fields, and then we're gonna print them out, and then we're gonna stop the form from submitting. Okay, so let's now jump in the browser, refresh. Okay, so just put in a bunch of random data, let's submit, boom. Okay, and so you can see these different strings that are printing out here in the console. So we were able to successfully grab all the information. Great, so now we come back in here, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to put in a couple different if statements. And so we're just going to check and see, just do some basic, validation on them. So what we'll do is, so maybe the first one is we'll just make sure they're not leaving anything blank. So we'll go if name dot length, and so the string, so the name variable is a string, and then in every string in JavaScript has a length property on it that tells you how many characters are in that string. And so we can go name.length, and then that's going to give us whatever number, the number of characters that are in that string. And then this exclamation mark here, it flips the opposite. And so this is, I'm going a pretty, this is how I would write this in production. It can be a little confusing at first, but whatever you pass into these parentheses and the if statement is going to ultimately simplify down to either a true value or a false value, a 1 or a 0. And if it's true, then the code that's in this block between these curly braces will execute. If this turns into false, then it won't execute and it will skip over this if block. And so what we're saying here is that, so name.length is, if it's empty, then it will be 0. And 0 in JavaScript is interpreted as a falsy value. It's false. It's considered false. So 0 is considered false, false is considered false, null is considered false, undefined is considered false. And so this is false, and then we put this exclamation mark on it, and exclamation mark reverses any Boolean value. So true and false, those are called Boolean values. And so the exclamation mark reverses that. And so if name.length is 0, that's false, the exclamation mark flips it to true. And so then this statement evaluates to true. So then the code that is in this if block will execute. It may have been a little confusing. You guys have gone through the Python tutorials and stuff, and so you should be familiar with basic if statement syntax. But if you have any other questions about it, let me know. But it's helpful to be able to think about it in its basic terms and exactly what is happening and at each stage of execution, what's happening to the variables and data and the properties and things like that. And that's what helps you become a better software engineer. So, okay, so we're saying if the name.length is nothing, then we're going to alert name field must not be blank. Okay, so an alert is essentially it creates a modal, it stops execution on the page. They're super annoying, spammy websites that you've ever encountered. They use a lot of these because it like kills everything and it doesn't let you navigate away. Luckily, Chrome can make it so you can stop alerts from continuing to appear. But essentially, it's the annoying brother to console.log. So, but we just want to make it really plain and obvious. So, okay, we'll refresh, hit submit, and it says name field must not be blank, and that's because this name field right here is blank. And if I put some stuff in there, submit, nothing happens. It doesn't trigger that if statement, so it doesn't enter into there. So I'm going to expand this right here, and I'm going to make it so this if statement checks for the checks for values in all of the input fields. So we're going to use this OR operator. And so the OR operator makes it so this, well, I'll write it out and then I'll explain it. So author.length or year published.length or pages.length. Okay, so what the OR operator does is it makes it so everything that's in this line right here, they're all going to be checked until one of them is true. So it's going to look at this first one. Oh, okay, it's going to look at this first one and it's going to say, is it true? And if it's false, then it checks this one. If this one's false, then it checks this one. If this one's true, then it stops and it immediately comes into here. It doesn't need to check anymore. With the OR operator, we're saying if one of these is true, then execute execute this block of code. The opposite to it would be the AND operator, which is 2 ampersands like that. But we're not using that right now. But anyway, this is so essentially what this is checking is it's looking at all of the input fields and it's seeing if any of them are blank, if any of them have a length of 0. And so I'll just change it to fields must not be blank. And then now let's go test it out in the browser. So jump back into Chrome, refresh. Okay, so name, well, submit, fields must not be blank. Okay, so let's put some values in there. Fields must not be blank. Put some stuff in there. Fields must not be blank. You're published. Boom. Okay, so now all 4 of those input fields now passed our check. Okay. All right, so let's see. What's something else that we can change? What's something else that we can check for? Let's check for numbers. Let's make sure that in pages and year published that they're passing in a number. So, all right. So the first thing that we'll do here is we're going to there's a couple functions that are kind of built in on the global scope in JavaScript. So it's kind of like with Python, how you have different math functions or different things that just kind of exist and they're always there. You don't have to import them or anything like that. And some of the more like complex things you do, but there's like some basic different functions and helper things that you can just, they're always there on the global scope available for your use. And one of them that we have is called parse int. And so it's a function, and then we pass in a string, and then it's going to turn it into a number. So let me show you this in the browser. So the cool thing about the developer console in Chrome is that you can come in here and you can develop some, or you can test out little like functions. And so see we have parse int, and we can autocomplete on it. We know that it's there, and then now I can put a string in there, and I'll go 1 2 3 4 5, and then as I hit enter, you see it changed it into this number 1 2 3 4 5. If I pass in ABC to it, it gives me this value that's not a number, and that's kind of an error object thing that you're testing for, that you can test for. So anyway, if you pass a number to it, then anyway, if a string, if it's only numbers and it comes into it, then it's going to come out as a number. So well, what we can do here is we can say if type of parse int, and then we'll go year published does not equal number. Okay, let me just test this real quick, make sure this works. So alert, and we'll say must take a number. Okay, so let me just come back in here, make sure this works real quick. Oh, field must have blank, so let me fill these other ones in. Okay. All right. Let me think here. Okay, so now, all right, here, I'm going to show you how to kind of debug some stuff. So let's do, so one of the big ones is just console.log, and then that's going to let us see the data and what it looks like in the browser. And so we're going to go type of. So type of year published. And actually, I'm going to go parse int. Okay, so I'm going to take parse int, or year published. I'm going to turn it into a number. And I'm going to get the type of it and print it out. So I'm going to essentially see what comes out on the left side of this this equation here, this expression. All right, might be uppercase. Let's see. So come back in here. We'll enter in some different data. All right, submit, and year published number. Okay. All right, so let's see. If type of parse int year published, alert year published. Interesting. Okay, so now let's come in here and then let's do a. So essentially, I'm going to make this equal to number. Let's see if this evaluates to true or false. Okay. All right, so then let's go SDF, 1, 2, 3, 4, SDF, submit. True. Interesting. So, okay, so if it does not equal number, oh yeah, so I'm saying if it doesn't equal number, it is a number. So if I put F, still says true. Okay, so let's see what parse int 1, 2, 3, 4 f equals. Ah, so it removes that. So I think okay, interesting. All right, so I actually used a different method of testing for this earlier, so I'm going to switch to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, does parse int of year published equals, oh, maybe that's what, type of non, oh, okay, yep. That's one thing that's interesting about non here, is non is, it's not a number, but its type is number, and then if you go non equal to non, that's false. And so anyway, it has some interesting like edge case values, so behaviors. So okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go parse int year published equals parse int. Let's see, wait. Let's lose my train of thought. Okay. All right, let's see here. That's right, because it, okay. All right, and okay, we'll go over the double ampersand check right here. Okay, so parse int year published does not equal number, and we'll go parse int published. Okay, then we'll go all right. Actually, you know what? I think we'll do or here. All right, let me make sure I got these all wrapped up. Okay, so the only way to check if something is non in JavaScript is you have to use this built-in function that checks to see if something is non. So, all right, so what we'll do is we'll say if the type of the string when it's turned into an integer, if it's not equal to a number, actually, well, all right, let's, sorry, let me think about this a second. Okay, so let's put this, I'm going to put this one after. Okay. All right, so if we go is non parse int year published. Okay, so if this turns out to be a not a number value, then we'll say year published must take a number. But if it's not non, and then anyway, we can check to see if it's a number. So let's see how this turns out. So we'll stick in a value here, stick in a value here, and then we'll put in just a number that should work there. Okay, that works. And then if we pass in that, let's see. Great. Your published must take a number. All right. So, and granted, this is not. This is more just an exercise in using different logical operators and different data types and how you have to kind of, transfer them around and change them into different things, and less of an actual like secure way to secure your code. And so, and again, if you really want to secure your inputs to your database, you have to do that on your server. Because on the browser, they could just come in and delete this if statement and then run the code and still submit it to the server. Okay. So, all right, so there's one more, there's one more little thing I want to build in here. One more thing I want to show you guys. So, all right, so let's build it down here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make an input, and we're going to give it the ID of background color. All right, and then we're going to make a button. I'm going to call this change color. All right, and then change background color. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to make a, I'm just going to make sure those are on a different line. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to make a input field that we can type in a new color and then push a button and it's going to change the background of our page. And so what we're going to be doing with this, again, is we have to attach an event listener to a DOM node. I'll explain what that is in a minute. And then we're going to go through and modify a CSS or a style attribute of an element inside of a function. So we have to go in and grab that element from the page, and then we have to change the style element on it. And so there's those three different principles that we're gonna work through here. So, all right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach an event listener to this button. And what an event listener is it's a function, and it's gonna wait for a specific event to occur. There's specifically defined events inside of the browser that happen. Some of them are click. So when you click on something, and a click event is fired on that element. And so you can have code that listens for that click that essentially runs when it detects a click event. Other ones are hover. So when your mouse hovers over something, you can change the styles. You can make the button like jump out at them. You can make it glow or change the border or whatever. So there's like clicking down or clicking up or hitting the enter key or moving your mouse over something, or when the mouse leaves that thing. There's all these different events that are constantly firing. And so what we're going to do in our JS script is we're going to attach a function to this button that we're going to have run when it detects a click event. So this is a kind of a one-time thing that runs at the beginning of our function and beginning of our script. So what we're going to do is we're going to go document dot get element by ID, get element by ID. And then we're going to go, can I jump back over to the HTML? Change color. All right. Then we're going to go add event listener. Let me just double check that that's, yep, add event listener. Okay. All right. So then what we're going to do is we're going to specify the event listener that we want to listen for. So we're going to say click. So when someone clicks on the button that has the ID of change color, then we're going to execute this function. Okay. So this is a very common syntax here. We're passing in a function to another function. This is called a callback function. So you pass in this function, and then that function is just going to wait. And then when the browser detects a click event on the change color ID, whatever element that is, then it's going to execute this callback function that's going to run. And so this is a very, very common thing within JavaScript. You have this idea of these callback functions that wait and get run later when specific events occur, either events from the user clicking around and doing stuff on your page, or maybe an event of like data coming back from the browser. Like you sent a message off to the browser, you want to get some data, and then you're waiting for the response. The response comes back, and then you have a function that was waiting, and it runs and it executes. So, all right, so click function. Okay, so now in here, I'm just going to put in you clicked me. All right, so we can see this in action. Okay, so we're accessing the document, get element by ID, change color. So it's going to grab that button, add the event listener, which the event listener is a method. It takes in 2 arguments. The first one is a string that specifies the event, so click. The second one is a function. And so we pass in this called an anonymous function because it doesn't have a name like this one. It's just a function. We don't care about naming it because we're not reusing it anywhere else. And so the function comes in, and we're just going to run console.log, you clicked me. Okay, so here's our stuff, and then boom, you clicked me. You can see each time I click it, it's running it again, and so you can see there's a number going up because that's the browser saying that this message was printed 27 times in a row. Okay. All right, so now instead of here, what we need to do is we need to access the we need to access this. We're going to access the body. Well, we need to access the input background color so we can get whatever string they entered, and then we need to access the body so we can change the background color of the body. So to access the input, we use background color. So we're going to go var color gets document.get element by ID, and then we pass in that, and we'll go dot value, we'll get the value property. So again, very similar to grabbing this stuff down here. As you notice, we have a lot of repeat code going on here. When we go over jQuery in the future, there's a lot of shortcuts to this, and so you don't have to type out 30 characters like we did here. You can grab it in significantly less, and so you very, very, very rarely will have to write vanilla JavaScript to interact with the DOM like this. More often than not, you're going to be using either jQuery or React or Angular, something like that, to actually interact with it, and it's much more powerful, convenient, and you don't have to write as much code, and there's a lot of neat shortcuts that you can take. But it's good to just kind of get the fundamentals and understand how the browser works and how JavaScript, HTML, and your styles all interact with each other. All right, so let's do var body. Go document.get element by ID. I put body on here. I'm doing just the ID right now to keep it simple. There's multiple ways that you can query for DOM nodes or HTML elements. You can do get element by ID, you can get element by class names, and that returns an array because a class you can use multiple times, and so that can return multiple objects. You can get element by class name, or by tag name, I mean, so you can target specific elements based off of their name, body or button or input. You can also query by the child, so you can get an element, and then you can query for the nested elements that are inside of it. There's a lot that you can do, and you get very, very specific. But we're just touching on this this basic one right now. Okay, so we're gonna go document.get element by ID body. We're just gonna leave it at that. So now body, the variable it has a reference to this DOM node. So I'm gonna print this out so you can see what it looks like. I like to pass in a string and then the value. I like to pass in both arguments to the console.log just because you get a million things printing out in the console, and then it just gets kind of messy to follow along. So, all right, so come in here and change background color. Boom. So body. You see, I hover over it, and in the browser even highlights it. So it's this interactable DOM node. And there's the form, and anyway, all the HTML and stuff that's nested inside of the body. And so there's a bunch of different little helper properties on it, different helper methods that we can use to interact with it and change things about it. So so we're just going to Google it. And someone had mentioned that we should talk to you guys about how to Google some stuff. And so right now I want to look up I want to find the specific reference for changing a style on the body. And so I try to think like, okay, change style JS. And so I include the JS on there. That's kind of, you'd almost think of it as like I kind of break this down by like, there's my message and then I'm putting hashtags on it, like for a tweet. And it's almost like by doing this, I'm just thinking like hashtag JS. So like, and then Google's smart enough to know, okay, it sees JS on there. It's not going to give me for how to change styles with clothing or, or whatever. And so it sees JS and it knows, okay, JavaScript. And then, and so then I need to kind of scan and see, like, make sure that it's not like something for jQuery, but I want, vanilla JavaScript. And so I write here, I see JavaScript, HTML, DOM, changing CSS. I'm like, okay. In W3 Schools, they have a bunch of pretty basic tutorials. And so I know that if I come in here, I'm going to see a very, very clean line like that that's going to give me a good definition. So yeah, when you Google stuff, you want to kind of think like, what are some hashtags, and then what is the most basic question that I can search. And the more concise you can be, the better. And then try to put on those little hashtags. So JS, DOM, or stuff like that. So, and maybe I can show some other examples of different ways that you can Google and do stuff like that. But it really is an important skill, and that and the better you get at Googling, and the faster you can get at finding your information, then the faster your development process will go. So, all right, so I see here document.get element by ID, and there's an ID in there, and then we can go .style, .property. Okay, so there's a style property, which is an object, and then on there, it's going to have all the specific CSS styles. And so background is the property that I want. So I'm going to come back in here. So I'm going to go, okay, so I'm going to go body.style. I'm going to jump back in, make sure it was style, not styles. Okay, so it's style dot background. And I'm going to set that equal to color. Okay, all right, let's see if that works. Now I'll jump back into Chrome, refresh, blue. All right, so change it to this garish blue color. Let's change it to FFF. That's a hexadecimal code. So with colors, there's this cool little color picker thing you can access here in this Elements tab. So if I come into Body and I see Background, whenever you see where a color is, you can click on this little box and it gives you a color picker. And so you can go and you can like actually find all the different colors that are on the page and grab one, or you can like drag a thing around and manipulate it in real time. Generally, when you're fine-tuning some of your CSS styles, you're going to want to do it using this color picker, or using like this live editing down here in the Elements tab. It makes it so you can tweak things, get things just right, your margins and whatever, and then you can take those and go and save them into your code, and it makes it so there's a little quicker turnaround time. So if we come in here, we have RGBA, so red, green, blue, and then alpha. And then alpha is like how transparent something is. And so you can use hexadecimal values. Hex, there's this HSLA. I've never used that before. Generally, I use hex or RGBA. You can also use RGB and leave out the A for the alpha. And so I can say like, anyway, so let's do this actually. Let's go to CNN.com. Okay. So I'll come into CNN, let's say I want their exact color of red. So I'm going to go inspect. I'm going to use this little thing and hover over there. I just find a color to bring up the color picker. And then I can hover over the red here, grab it. Okay, so CB000. That is the background that I want for this page. And so I actually don't need to change it in the code. I can come back and refresh, and I can type that in and then change background color. All right, so CNN red. That's the background of this page. So, all right, so there's some basics for how to manipulate the DOM. Again, like in review, we learned what the DOM was. That's your HTML elements. It's built up into these nodes that you can interact with JavaScript. You can change the styles on it. This script that runs once, when it runs, and it adds this validate function or validate form to the scope. It adds this event listener to the element that we targeted here, which was the button. When they click, then this callback function is executed. And then inside of here, we query the DOM and we grab the value from that input field. We grab the body, and then we take the body and we change a style on it, and we change it to whatever we want to type, whatever we want to enter. Here on the validate form, again, we grab some data. I showed you just kind of some stuff with types and length and strings and conditions and kind of a bunch of different principles and things like that that are going on in here. And all right, and my 2-year-old daughter's trying to get into the room. Okay, so yeah, and then return false. Oh, I should make that return true by default. So that way, if none of these right here are tripped, then it should successfully add the information to the database. So, all right, so that's what the validation function looks like. That's us adding some magic to a button. And yep, there we go. So that is our lecture for the day. I'm going to go in and look at some questions now in the questions tab. All right, so questions. Okay, maybe type them in now or make them pop out. Oh yeah, just Googling color selector. Great, that works too. Let's see. Okay, yeah, does it replace this as a string thing? Okay. All right, well, I'll reach out afterwards and, okay. All right, looks like everything's been kind of answered. So I'll answer some questions afterwards. Just I'll monitor the channels and add some stuff, and then I'll be posting the homework in a little bit. I have to finish up a last little part for it. Okay, does the exclamation mark name.length statement does it default to 0? Yes. So let me jump back in the browser. If I go into the console, so I can actually go quote dot length, and we'll dive into, like, in the JavaScript course we'll get into prototypes, we'll get into ECMAScript 6 and get much more deeper with the language. And but when I type in these two quotes, that's actually it's instantiating an instance of the string class right there, and so I instantly have access to these methods. And so I go .length and it's 0. If I just put a space in there and go .length, then it's 1. And so an empty string has a length of 0. And so by default, all these input fields have empty strings in them. Yeah, that's important to know. It's so they are strings, even though they're just empty. It's just an empty string, but they are of the type string to start out. Okay. All right. Another thing I wanted to talk about just real quick. Worked real hard. We got our new website rolled out, and we have our full-time and part-time courses coming up, and we would love to have you guys jump in. We're going to be teaching data structures and algorithms. We're going to go over binary search. We're going to go over different graph traversal problems. We're going to go over graphs and linked lists and stacks and queues and trees, and anyway, lots of different kinds of hash tables. You'll be implementing a lot of those from scratch. Yeah, we're going to talk about CSS preprocessors, React.js, and Redux. We're going to be everything's with an agile development workflow, which is considered one of the better software development workflows right now. We'll also provide career support, negotiating strategies, help you write your resume, help you apply to jobs. And this is during and after the course, and we want to establish a very strong alumni network and do everything we can to support you during and afterwards individually, and just really want to provide a quality and high quality and intimate experience by keeping it to small class sizes. We'll also be going over React Native, so we'll be touching on mobile development, how to build iOS and Android apps, again using JavaScript and React, and then also touching on neural networks. That's something that I've had a chance to learn and work on at work, but using some of these machine learning things to really make some powerful features for some applications. And so the part-time class covers everything that's in the full-time class. You just don't have as much time to work on projects. And you have less hours that you're putting in, and so with the full-time class you will get further ahead, but the part-time class will be a great experience. Let's see, yeah, you'll just when you finish it, you will have a deployed website. You'll have your deployed application, and yeah, so some fun stuff that we'll be going over. And so we'd love to have you guys come in and check it out. The part-time class is we have it $4,000, and then the full-time class is $7,000, and those are our starting rates. And we'll be eventually those prices will be going up, but for the first cohort, we'll be keeping those low. Yeah, so I'd love to have you guys come check this out and let us know if you have any questions and about the courses or about the homework and the stuff that we're working on now. And we will be starting a free mini JavaScript bootcamp starting in March. So that's going to be going over more of just the some of the more I guess current front-end JavaScript stuff as opposed to this Python templating stack that we're working on right now. Okay, so thanks everyone, and glad you could all attend and invite your friends, and yeah, it's great. We'll see you in the chat. See you in the chat chats.